Hello and welcome back to another casual deck design video. This is another one of my 60 card casual decks. I haven't been posting these recently because I've actually been doing quite a few changes as of late. If you missed my previous video, I've kind of lost someone close that I was financially supporting, and I've also been hit financially by another burden, and I do use my magic cards as a financial resource. So I haven't been able to construct a whole bunch recently. Typically what I do is use these again as a financial resource. So in periods of me not playing, I will purge with the intent of essentially just putting everything into just a handful of decks, pimping out a few decks and optimizing what I'm keeping. So I've done that with two 60 card decks here. I'm going to be showing this video is my Sliver deck, and another video is a full art deck, which will be shortly. I love slivers. My favorite sliver deck, the strongest one I used to run was a Dega, or a Mardu I guess nowadays, a black, white, and red sliver deck, which was focused around land destruction using necrotic sliver, and it was a very cutthroat, being that I was running things like the Lion's Eye Diamonds, lots of reanimation effects, the Living Death and whatnot. Because I was running land destruction, I was told to take that deck apart, and people didn't like it. Even though it was multiplayer, it still wasn't as fast as I liked. It was apparently fast enough. What we have here is a black-red combat-based deck. When you think of slivers, the best color to run in slivers is usually blue and green, because you get ramp and draw from things like Gem Hide and Dormant. I'm playing a black-red one because it's my favorite colors. It's combat-based, and it doesn't have what most slivers deck have, as in the overwhelming forces. So let's go through this. There's new additions here since the M14 set. They've made these new guys. Not really fond of the artwork, the humanoid appearance. I don't really like them at all, but they do have nice lower curves. We have a 1 for a 1/1 first strike. It's all slivers I control first strike. And that's another thing they changed. I'm just not too fond of it. If you notice, these sleeves are humongous, by the way. These are actually quad sleeved. This is one of the decks that I don't plan on ever getting rid of. And the deck is all foil. And I also love this sleeve back. This is one of the first sleeve backs I've ever had, from like 5, 6, 7 years, however long ago. But these sleeves themselves are very poor quality, so I have to use essentially a protector for the sleeve themselves. And since that would make them upside down, I put another layer just for shits and giggles. A lot of people make fun of me for double and triple sleeving decks, so I had to have a quad sleeve deck just for no reason whatsoever. So we have the Striking Slivers. There's only 3 of them. This is actually my favorite sliver ever printed. The Hunting Sliver, or Hunter Sliver. Provoke is a very fun mechanic. They didn't put it on a lot of cards. There's a couple beasts that have, and there's a goblin that has it. But essentially forcing something to block. This coming up here is a lot of first strike and death touch and forced blocks, and the other one coming up, my second favorite sliver, is Two-Headed Sliver. This, when it was first printed, that mechanic just blew my mind. Of course, this mechanic has been used quite a bit as of late, so it's no longer a very unique thing, but forcing forced blocks and first strike into death touch, which is coming up, or evasion because something cannot be blocked, is very good. Homing Sliver is a remnant of when I was doing Mass Reanimator, because sliver cycling means I can just dump things into my graveyard. Earlier games, when I was doing things with Lion's Eye Diamond and Mass Recursion, I was able to dump about 3 key slivers in my graveyard, reanimate them about turn 2 or 3, and then that would usually just lock out the game. But these guys are good because I still have 2 reanimation spells left. Sedge Sliver is the only Lord Sliver in these colors that I have access to, requiring a swamp, and that regeneration is always really good. So we have a playset of him. He's actually my 3rd favorite sliver. Magma Sliver used to be my absolute favorite because it just used to end games, but my opponents learned this is a very powerful sliver, and if you have an army out, this will just really end the game fast, especially if you have a trample effect. Thorncaster is new. It's nifty if you have Death Touch. It doesn't always work with Death Touch, although the wording there is always going to be a little obscured. Because this is technically not combat damage that he's doing, but it's still it's a 2/2 that you can use to ping out. He's one of the more expensive slivers. I think he's the most expensive red one left. Yeah, the rest of these are the black ones. The Tap to Regenerate is my favorite one because, well, it's super cheap to get out there. It's close to a Mother of Runes that slivers can get. And then we got the Syphon Sliver, which gives us lifelink. This is something I don't really think is necessary for the deck, but again, I typically do play multiplayer, and since I have greatly weakened this deck's reanimation aspect, something like this can keep me safe, keep me in the game there. And Toxin is the most expensive black one here, because it does give me a technical version of Death Touch. Again, it has to be combat damage, and that really does suck, because the Syphon, or the Thorncaster there, that pinging does not actually kill unless he has legitimate Death Touch, and the Toxin does not grant legitimate Death Touch. So that's a giant pile of slivers. As you expect, there'll be very few supporting cards. Slivers get better with more slivers, so we don't really want to put too much non-slivers in here. So again, I love combat tech tricks. Brute Force is one of my old favorite cards. It's Red's version of Giant Growth. No one really expects this card, and that's what makes it so great. And then, of course, I have a pair of Patriarch's Bidding. Again, multiplayer, I'm going to probably get my board blown up quite a bit, and this is the game-ending spell. I did not have any haste slivers in there, if you noticed. In a 1v1, that's probably ideal. In multiplayer, it's not so much. And my only real draw mechanic here is a pair of Skullclamps. Most of my slivers do have 1 toughness. Some of the more important ones, of course, have higher toughness, but if I don't mind clamping them to draw into a Patriarch's Bidding, then it doesn't really matter. And finally, a pair of Coat of Arms. These just really make the army almost impossible to deal with. Lastly, we are onto the lands. There are 24 lands in the deck. So we have a playset of Sliver Hive. This is essentially any color I want, since most all of my deck is either Sliver. The only card or lands that I don't have that are an artifact would be Pate's Bidding and the Brute Force, but that's really only 4 of the cards. So this is essentially a really fantastic land. Producing tokens, even though it costs 5, is kind of slow. Mutavault is our last Sliver. Of course, we have to have a playset of these guys. Mutavault is absolutely busted. I only have 2 caverns in here. There's not a lot of control in the casual metas that I play, so making them uncounterable is great, but it also just, again, it adds for any of those colors. It's a colorful land. Then, of course, we have to have a couple ways of guaranteeing specific lands, so we have all the fetches we can. I do have 4 Blood Crypts, but I'm trying to get 2 more of these. Again, this is not necessary to make a deck good, it's just I'm pimping out the deck, and this is what I was talking about earlier in the video about me purging other things to improve what decks I am keeping. So, and then the rest of these are just basics. Only 2 mountains, although the deck is heavily leaned on black, and since I do have quite a few of mana, or those special lands like the Hive and the Caverns, then it's yeah. But yeah, that's my Sliver deck. Again, my favorite ones are, it's always this one. This is not really a very strong mechanic anymore. When I was playing this with my Dagobert build, that was literally right when Planar Chaos came out, or a Shift came out, because I fell in love with Necrotic Sliver. So combat shenanigans, you could do a lot better instead of what this design is, and when it comes to slivers, you can do way better using the green slivers for pump effects ramp from Gem Hide and the new Mana Whiff guy, and there's a lot of better things to do with slivers. This is a very subpar, not powerful sliver deck. But you can have some very interesting interactions out. So of course, like any kind of first strike put onto something that has like regeneration, you just start stacking sliver abilities, things like a first strike death touch and then forcing people to block. Things like that are great. But again, this is not a very powerful sliver deck. If you have any experience with slivers, then you know I'm missing quite a few key cards. I am playing this as I just like Rakdos, so I'm going to play the Rakdos Sliver variant the best it can. But of course, if you have any experience with slivers and you don't absolutely loathe slivers like a massive fraction of the Magic community does, go ahead and share your fun sliver stories. They're always great.